All right, and we're ready to go. Once again, hi everybody. My name is Jerry Bartels. I'm a technical specialist here at Autodesk, specializing with the civil infrastructure products. Today's presentation is going to be on InfraWorks 360 Interoperability Bonanza. The original title was more around InfraWorks 360 interoperability with the Infrastructure Design Suite, including Navisworks and 3ds Max and Civil 3D and AutoCAD. But that would have tended to have drifted off the slide a bit. So we were thinking about cutting it back to just interoperability, but we're going to be covering more than just what has traditionally been an InfraWorks 360 to Civil 3D. We didn't want to give that perception. So Eric Chappelle had come up with the term Bonanza. So it may be different than what we've done before, but that's what we're going to be covering as a wealth of information and using things that will create an InfraWorks 360 in some of our other applications. So to get started, if this is the first one of the webcasts of this type that you've attended of this series, welcome. This is something that the product team puts together, and they host twice a month on the first and third Wednesdays. The sessions themselves are recorded, and they're available on the Community Center that you can watch them if this is your first, or maybe you've missed a couple, or it's been a while since you've attended one of the sessions. The goals are listed here, what we're trying to accomplish is hosting these. But at the end of the day, the primary thing is to draw our folks who are responsible for developing the product and adding features and functionality, bring them closer with the folks that are using it. So any feedback, should give you an idea of what we're working on, and maybe some ideas of where we're going with the technology, and then get some feedback from you on what you think about what you have so far and what might be helpful for you moving forward. It's just a way to create a dialogue and engage the end users. So the next webcast in the series after this one is going to be part 3 around creating animated objects for InfraWorks 360. That's going to be hosted on Wednesday, January 20th. I've seen the first 2 parts of this. That's been fantastic. We have the ability that we can have some animation now in InfraWorks 360 on an object level, and you can see now that that's extended. We can show some vehicles as well. So if you've not had the opportunity to see the first 2, once again, they've been recorded. You can catch up on those before the next session is hosted on Wednesday the 20th. Information about all of these, once again, is available on the community site, the forum, Twitter, and you can see the different links and addresses that are available to get access to those. Now, Eric had asked that I run a poll. Typically, we start this to get a little interaction with the folks that are online. So I'm driving this myself today, so we'll go ahead and run the poll, get some feedback on that. So if you could just maybe take a moment to fill in some values on that. We're interested in what your current usage level is with InfraWorks 360. We've seen it growing over time from those folks that maybe haven't installed it yet, maybe some other ones that are just starting to get up to speed, and then other folks all the way up to that they're using it on almost every project. All right, and as I look at the values starting to populate now, it's good to see we've got folks that are using it primarily from dabbled in it to regularly used it, up to almost 10% that are using it on almost every project now. So that is fantastic to see. Thank you very much for giving us that feedback. That helps us as we create webcasts like this or other correspondence or communications, give us an idea of where folks are so that we can target it so that it's of the most value to the people that we're sending it out to. So I'm going to close that poll. We'll go ahead and I'll move forward here just a couple more slides and I'll get rolling. I've mentioned the InfraWorks 360 community a number of times so far. The actual site for that is Autodesk.com, InfraWorks 360 community. What it has is all things InfraWorks. It's your one-stop shop. So from there you can get access to the forum, the gallery, you can access latest videos, webcast recordings, where this and the prior ones will be posted. The idea station is one of the more popular things that's on the site right now. That's where if you have an idea of a feature or function within InfraWorks 360, maybe you'd like to see something new, maybe you'd like to see something existing that's already in the product, maybe work a little different way or accept some different data or maybe respond to some different inputs. you could post that information on the idea station, and that's regularly reviewed by the folks in development. They can respond, and then also that gives them some ideas. In a lot of ways, it gives you an opportunity to engage them directly and then provide that direct feedback that can be factored into them determining what, priorities, what needs to go into the application, and what things should be considered first or before other things. It also gives other folks in the community the opportunity to review those. They can post kudos, so you can see that, maybe you're not the only one that would like to see something like this. The wealth of the community may be interested as well. The other thing that I'd like to point out that is out there, there's a learning tab that has been implemented recently. With that learning tab, you can get access to quick tutorials on how to do various things, and then other videos and information about if you're getting started with InfraWorks 360, or maybe there's a specific thing that you're trying to do with InfraWorks 360. It gives you a nice repository of information that's available to get up to speed quickly using the tools. So with that, can't forget the disclaimer statement. This is the safe harbor thing that keeps me from getting in trouble. I won't read it aloud as far as what exactly is in there. We start with one of these in every webcast. The general gist of what's here is at some point in the presentation I may start to get a little excited and maybe say some things that aren't necessarily true. So please, if as you go through the presentation, don't make any purchasing decisions based solely on the statements that I make of what we're covering today. Now, that being said, my intention of what will be covered today will be software that is currently shipping with the Infrastructure Design Suite as well as InfraWorks 360. So everything that I'm showing should be things that are available to folks in the latest release of the software. If I were to maybe answer a question or delve into something separate from that, then I'll make sure and point that out. The last thing is, because we want this to be interactive, I do have a gentleman on the line that is going to be monitoring the session as we go that can help with questions. We've got far too many folks online to be able to do it live over the phone. So if you have a question, you'd like to post it to the chat window. That will be the location that Dave, who's online with me right now, can hop into some of those. I think he's presented several of the webcasts previously on this as part of this series. And then if I'm running something and there's a lull in the action, I may have Dave open up the line. We'll maybe take some questions live as we go, just as folks type those in. So with that, we're going to flip over to the InfraWorks 360 Interoperability Bonanza. First thing, when Eric had given me the title Bonanza, I immediately thought of the old Western show with the Cartwrights who were working the land. Interestingly enough, from the map that they used, the Ponderosa, I always thought it was north of Lake Tahoe, but it's not. It's actually east, because the map north is actually pointing off to the left. So it tells me a couple of things. That one, why surveyors are always excited about north pointing straight up on a map, and two, there was obviously not a surveyor that was involved in putting this together for the show. But since we're going to be covering a lot of different things and it's terrain that we're going to be working with, this is going to be the, I guess, the premise of the scenario that we'll be working with for our presentation today. So with that, I'm going to drop out of my PowerPoint, and we're going to fire up InfraWorks 360. So I'm in that now, and what I'd like to do, we'll get started running this with Model Builder. And the area that I'm interested in is Lake Tahoe, and we'll get this started. So the Ponderosa from the 1860s with the Cartwrights would have been in that area. Not a lot going on in there for making a model. I'm going to want to make something small that we can be a little more nimble with, because I've got a number of things that I'd like to show. So we're going to come in and look at maybe this area here. And we're going to look at just creating perhaps just a bridge across the Carson River here. So to do this, I'm going to select my area. We'll pick a point in this location up and over, basically three square miles. We'll put that in my default group, and I'm going to call this Bonanza for right now. and we'll create our model. Now we'll give that a couple of seconds to run. My goal today, because we were going to be doing a number of things, I created a video that talks a lot about what we're going to be covering in this session. What I want to do is I want to take data from InfraWorks 360. We can create some really detailed models around buildings, the bridge, maybe some other components from within the tool. And I'd like to be able to start to leverage those in other software solutions within the suite, that being Civil 3D, Raster, Map, Raster Design. I can deal with it in Navisworks in a number of different places. Traditionally, if we move data from InfraWorks 360 to Civil 3D, we look primarily at the road center line and maybe the bridge, but the detail of what we get, especially when it comes to the 3D bridge, is kind of a watered down version of the bridge that we can create within the software. So what I wanted to do was show some ways that we could move these things back and forth and handle the coordinate systems accordingly. I created a video that showed some of this. That's up on the website right now on the community center, so it shows that. But the one thing with that video is I already had a number of things created. So my intention today was, as I went through to do this, I wanted to try and start totally from scratch so that it wasn't pulling a bunch of pre-baked things out of the oven as we go. So running this couple tests yesterday, I was able to get that model up in just a couple of minutes. I ran one this morning. It took about 8. I've got one here that we can use if we need to. In the meantime, let me fire up a couple other things that we're going to work with. We'll launch our Navisworks because we'll be using that as we go. Then I can minimize that and then take it from there. So we'll give that another couple of seconds here, and I still don't have it. So what I'm going to do is, rather than wait for that to come up, we'll go ahead and just go with this one. If the model from Model Builder had come up, this is the area that we would have run, we would have gotten. Using Model Builder, I've got the terrain, I've got some of the roads created, I've got some of the water. Not much in the way of buildings in this area, but I've got a model that I can start with to start to evaluate this bridge. Once again, I'm looking at creating something that's of a smaller scale so that I can be a little more nimble as I move these things in and out of different applications. So let's start by creating a bridge across the river. I'm going to create a local road. I'll assign that a style. We'll start at the intersection here. I'm going to come off in this direction. We'll cross the river, and then we'll maybe bring it up to where it's going to go into this area and eventually join up with the other road. So we'll just create this quickly. All right, once that's in, if we zoom up and look at it, because it crosses the river already, or there's a river there, we get a bridge that's for us by default because it's crossing water. That works out nicely for us. If I'd like to maybe adjust my elevations just a touch, let's go into my profile here. It's also nice that it's showing me the water in the location in my profile, so I can see exactly where the river is. If for some reason that was difficult for me to determine, always by hovering the mouse over that area, it shows us down in the bottom exactly what station that we're at. So in that location should be around 1350, 1390, somewhere in there, and I see that's about the location of the stationing that we're seeing in this location. So let's maybe raise this up a little bit. And really, I think that's pretty good. I don't need to change too much more. I've got enough that I can work with for a bridge. I'm going to select my roadway, and what we'll do is we'll extend the bridge over a little bit further so that it's not quite as tight to the water. Move this back in this direction. And maybe we'll enhance our bridge just a touch. Instead of using the default piers, I'm going to select those and go with, I like the arched myself. So I'm going to double pick to set that to the arch display, and then I can right click on that one and I can easily apply that to all the piers. So we'll get that in. And we'll do one other thing. Our bridge is nice in that if we zoom up, I've got a guardrail. I'd like to get a little bit more detail on it so that get a little more bonus information as I attempt to use this in Civil 3D or 3ds Max. So what I'm going to do is we'll apply a more detailed style to it. We'll bring up the styles palette. We'll come down to roads, grab the bridge deck, and we'll do this one here with the median. Bring that onto our bridge, and what we should get is we should get light standards. We should get the New Jersey barrier running down the middle. We've also got the fences and that on the outside. We get a fairly detailed bridge very quickly by creating this in InfraWorks 360. Okay, so with that created, I'm going to drop out of my styles palette here. We'll maintain this as our model for right now. The one thing that I need to do that if I had pulled this up from Model Builder is I need to assign a coordinate system to it, because by default it's just going to be in lats and longs. So we'll come in and we'll hop into my model properties. And if we go into the model properties, you'll see that in this model I've already got a projection associated with it that's Nevada west. It's NAD 27, but it's west and feet. So because Carson City and Lake Tahoe is pretty much on the border of California and Nevada, that puts us in that zone, and that's the coordinate system that we're working with. So with that, I'm pretty happy with my model. So let's go ahead, and for me to be able to use it in Civil 3D or be able to pull it directly, I'm going to have to close out of the model to do that. So I'm going to close, and we'll fire up Civil 3D on my screen. And I'm going to begin by going up to Insert. We'll grab InfraWorks 360, the InfraWorks 360 model, and I'm going to come down and we will select Carson 2 is the one that we're in right now. We'll open that. I do not have a coordinate system currently assigned within Civil 3D, so we'll set that to be consistent with what's in InfraWorks. I can establish an area that I'm interested in, so we'll select area, use my online map information to be able to do that. And the area that I'm going to work with, I can see a dark line as the limits of my model. I'm going to use an area that's just a little bit within those limits. We'll take something like that. And then we'll go ahead and I can select the information that I'm interested in. So I'm going to refine my selection set. I'm not going to bring in proposed surfaces. I'm going to bring in the existing. The planning roads, I'm not going to worry about. I'll bring in my design road. The water areas we'll bring in, and I'll bring in the bridge. So we'll click Open Model, and that information will automatically be transferred from my InfraWorks 360 directly into Civil 3D. Now as that comes in and starts to populate on the screen, it zoomed me out. We'll zoom in a bit closer. We can now see my alignment. We can see my surface has been created, and we can see my bridge. I'm going to go ahead and save this so that we've got a name. I'll put it on my desktop right now, which is where we'll put all the things for this project. This will be our Bonanza webcast. So we'll call this our civil model. And we'll save it. All right. So this is a fantastic way that I can bring in the Civil 3D information. I've got my centerline roadway. I've got my bridge. I'll take and highlight that. If I look at the object viewer for the bridge, I get a fairly detailed bridge. My piers in that look pretty similar to what I had in the model that I created, but I've lost a lot of the extra detail that was created with respect to the fence and the New Jersey barrier and the light standards. I'd like to at some point be able to maybe get access to that. So we'll start to look at how we can get to those things. All right. Now the first thing, let's maybe come back into InfraWorks. There's one other thing we're going to add to our model. Is I'd like to add a couple of buildings. So I've got the road, I've got my bridge. We'll come back to that model now. We'll add a couple of buildings that we can work with. So we'll go ahead and have this initialize. When this pops up, we'll probably see that our other model has come back from Model Builder at this point. Nope, not yet. Oh yeah, no, it did. It was this one right here. So we'll continue on with what we had. And what I'm going to do is this. In this location, I'd like to add a couple of buildings. We'll enhance our model a bit. I'm going to draw. We'll come in and create a building. I'll just grab the one facade here. And the one dimension that I would have you take note of is I'm going to type in 50 foot and enter so that it locks at a 50-foot dimension. I'll pick my point, and then I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'll continue to pick points from there. The reason I'm doing that first one at 50 feet is so that we can go back and we can look at that later to verify that the size of what's exported is correct. I'm going to go ahead and maybe create another building on the other side over here. So we'll select that guy and drop that one. All right. With my buildings created, as I look at these, my level of detail for the buildings has been turned up such that you can see that I've got the fire escapes on the outside. I've got some awnings outside the building. If I come over to this one, we'll see that my windows are inset, as is the doorway, and there's a lot more detail on the buildings. All right, where I set that was within the tools in here. We'll come back to my my application properties, and we'll go into my model generation. I'm going to show you where this is because by default it's usually for performance sake set down to low or medium. I'll set this to high. I did that so that I could get the detailed buildings out of this environment, much like the bridge. If you set that after the fact, you'll want to hit F5 to get it to redisplay your model, and then once your model is redisplayed, you'll have access to that higher level of detail with the buildings. All right, so at this point, I'm satisfied with my model. I'm going to come back to Civil 3D. If I'd like to see where those buildings exist in this environment, there wasn't the ability to export those buildings directly in that tool or import it through that tool that we looked at before. So instead, what I can do is using Map, I'm going to bring up the task pane. We'll go ahead and turn that on. What I'm going to do is connect to data, and I'm going to connect to the SQLite database, which is the file format that we're using for the InfraWorks model. I'll navigate out to Carson 2, and we'll connect. And then what I'm going to do is scroll down and tell it that I'd like to see the buildings. Go ahead and add that to Map. Now when I do that, on occasion, I'll see that my buildings are now in a white space, and from a coordinate standpoint, they're very different from where it should be. I've actually got coordinates down here at down in the negative values. What I'm going to do is this: if I save the drawing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to close it, close my civil model, and then we'll go ahead and then open that back up again. The reason being is that it had a coordinate system in it initially that was set by Civil 3D. Because I'm using the tools in Map, sometimes until I save, I might not have access to those both those coordinate systems being the same. So I'm going to zoom extents, and we'll see now that those buildings have been reprojected exactly into my model where they should be. All right, so just using the interaction with Map, I can start to pull data in just to see where it is. All right, maintain that connection back to InfraWorks 360. Those buildings look good, but maybe along the way, I'd like to get some of that detail that's in InfraWorks 360. I created those beautiful three-dimensional buildings. Maybe I'd like to bring those into Civil 3D and use that as part of my model, maybe leverage that even further downstream or at some place outside of the InfraWorks environment. Well, I can do that very easily. I'm going to come back to InfraWorks. We'll view my model here from the top. And one of the things that we'll look at here real quick is if I hover my mouse once again, like we looked at with the road to determine the station, if I hover over the point of the building down here, I can see roughly the coordinate of where that corner of the building is. So that's roughly 18, 18, 29. All right, so we'll just keep that in the back of our mind. 18, 18, 29 is the location of that corner. Let's do this. I'm going to export. If I want to bring this out, we'll export a 3D model. And using the options that are available to us with a polygon, I'm going to pick, we'll just window around the buildings in this location, double pick to finish. All right, you see the coordinates that we have. They're not necessarily going to be based on the extent of my model or the model itself. If I wanted to land in Civil 3D effectively where it's supposed to go, or back using the same coordinate systems, I'm going to set this to user defined. All right, and I'm going to set this to 0, and I'm going to set this to 0. So there's no shift. Basically, it's going to use the coordinates for the model geometry exactly as it sits. When it comes out, I'm going to push those out in multiple files, and really the only thing I'm interested in is the buildings. I'm going to put that out on my desktop here, put that in my Bonanza folder, and we'll use buildings.fbx. We'll save that, and I'll export. You'll see that there is the opportunity that I can export textures with that. Unfortunately, if I take it directly from InfraWorks 360 to Civil 3D, you'll see as we bring it in that I will get the geometry. I won't necessarily get the textures. We'll look at how we can add those in a moment. All right, because I'm going to do this and then maybe do some things beyond that. Another feature or function of Civil 3D just to make you aware of what I'm going to use. I'm going to type in the command undo. We'll hit enter. I'm not backing any commands up, so I'm not undoing a previous command. I'm going to take and put down a marker, so I'm going to hit M for marker. Then I can roll back to this particular point very quickly. So we'll see why I would use that in a minute. All right, let's go ahead and insert what we just created. So we'll import from our Bonanza folder here off my desktop. So desktop Bonanza, this is what we created today, my buildings. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure and set my FBX file units to 1 so that I'm one-to-one. I don't want any scaling or anything like that taking place. We'll say OK. We'll give that just a couple of seconds. It will process my FBK file or my FBX file. And when that file comes in, we'll see my buildings displayed on the screen. All right, that'll probably take maybe another 10, 15 seconds. Dave, any questions so far, or you've been able to keep up with those okay?
Yeah, there's been a few, and Shakri has been answering them.
Okay, fantastic.
Very well. We have a request. Can you show us how to adjust the water river showing incorrectly from InfraWorks 360 Model Builder? So I know that's not here, but that is a question.
Okay. All right, so at this point, what I have is the buildings have come in. What I'm going to do, just to show those quickly, is we'll make a quick lasso around those. With those selected, we'll go ahead and look at my object viewer, and if we view those, I can see that I do have my geometry. All right, I have the inset windows in that, but I didn't get the materials. All right, and that may be fine. That may be all that I need. If I just need to get the model geometry in here, that gives me a mechanism by which that I can do that. If I need to get it a little bit further, in other words, I want to bring the buildings in and I also want to get the materials associated with that, I have some opportunities to do that as well. So I'm going to close the object viewer, and then I'm going to back up in time. This is what that undo mark was for. So we can come down, I can say undo, and then I'm going to say B for back. and it's going to roll back to the point in time before I brought those in, because we'll be bringing those in again. All right, so let's do this. We'd like to get the buildings now with the materials. If I'm going to do this, I'm also going to bring the bridge as well. I only took the buildings before, but if we're going to do this a second time, bring in that level of detail with the materials, we'll do it for the bridge too. So we're going to go ahead and export 3D model, polygon, just to keep it somewhat size-wise, somewhat nimble that we can work with here. We'll pick those points. The area that we're going to work with, once again, we're going to set it to user defined. We're going to set these to 0. And this time, because I'm exporting a number of things, we'll just do it in a single file, and we'll put that out in my folder here, and we'll just call this site model, and we'll go ahead and export it. Now, when it takes it out this time, we'll come back to, we'll process it through Navisworks. Navisworks within the suite is going to give us our best ability to manipulate FBX files and still maintain our materials and all of the look and feel of the geometry that existed in the original authoring application. So I'm in Navisworks. All I need to do is I'm going to append. We'll go up to my folder here on the desktop. We'll grab my site model. It's brought in, and as I view that from the side, we see here is our model. I have the 3D geometry. I've got all the materials. If I start to orbit around this, I can see that I've got my fence and all of that. Like I said, that rich three-dimensional geometry that we created in the InfraWorks 360 environment, I've now been able to pull that out and into an environment here. We're going to use the step of going through Navisworks to basically bake in the materials such that we can bring it into Civil 3D and move it from there. But before we do that, a couple things. When we deal with Navisworks, we need to make sure that the geometry comes in, because this is a tool that we will use to bring together or consolidate a lot of different models from a lot of different authoring applications. I need to make sure that it's the right size. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll do review, and I'm going to measure. And if we come down to this point here at the base of the building, we'll go ahead and pick that point here and pull it off to the side, and we can see, we can see that my distance is roughly 1.6 feet. So that's definitely not the size of my model. It should have been around 50 foot, but that's all right. What that means is when the geometry came in, it was not scaled properly. So we'll go to the selection tree. Shows us our model, and a quick right click on the model itself. I can come down to units and transform. And instead of my units coming in as centimeters, I'm going to bring my units in as feet. And when we say OK, we see my geometry automatically updates so that it's more consistent with the 50 foot that we would have expected. Now, the other thing is, if there is questions about the coordinates that it currently resides, all right, that was like 18, 18, 29 or something like that. Can we see the coordinates here in Navisworks? And I can. If I come up to View and Windows, there is a measure tool that will show me those coordinates, that as I pick points to measure, it will show me where I'm at. So the corner we were looking at down here was this guy. All right, so if I pick, I didn't hit right on the corner, but I'm 18, 18, 30. I think we were 18, 18, 29 before. So I know now that my model is scaled properly and it's sitting at the correct coordinates that we would expect going into Civil 3D. All right, the only other thing that I'm going to do is I really don't want any of the surface information. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and I'm going to start to hide it. All right, I've already got the surface in my file. Granted, there's some proposed in here. I would do that with my corridor model anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and pull those out. What I'm interested in specifically is the bridge and the buildings. So we'll isolate those on the screen using hide, and then we'll come down and we'll export via FBX. Include textures, lights and cameras. I didn't create any anyway. We'll embed the textures are good. We'll say OK, and this is going to go in as my, we'll say project. We'll say building bridge. I'll save that FBX file. We'll come back to Civil 3D. Let's go ahead and take this bridge and we'll hide it. That guy's, oops. Gotta make sure that we hit the bridge and not the surface. So we'll isolate that and hide it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to import the project building and bridge. We'll say open once again, scale 1:1. We'll say OK. That information will be processed and it's displayed for us on the screen. If I come in and look at this, and let's save this guy, and then I'm going to use the shift and my wheel to adjust my display. It's showing me the aerial image underneath. It's not being draped, so it's actually getting a little confusing to see that there. So it won't drape these images, so I'm just going to turn that off for right now. And if we come in and look at this in a realistic view, I can see now that there's my red awning. I can see the colors light up for the windows. I can see the girder materials in that have been applied to the bridge. And if I render this, just using a render command in a Civil 3D environment, we'll see those materials are being applied to the geometry. All right, so now very easily I can bring not only the buildings and the materials themselves in fully represented in all the three-dimensional geometry that was created in InfraWorks, but I can also use that to bring in the bridge that would have been created using the bridge design module as part of InfraWorks 360. All right, now from here, one of the next places that folks typically want to go is, I just went to a top view, we'll zoom back in on this, is it's like, hey, this looks great, but what I would like to do is I'd like to leverage that bridge now maybe in 3ds Max. All right, there's a tool that we can export data out of Civil 3D. We can say output, we can go to export to 3ds Max, but like the tool that we export data out of InfraWorks 360 into Civil 3D, it's limited in what it can push out. From InfraWorks 360 to Civil 3D, I'm getting the centerline road, my intersection, a lesser, smaller number of facets on my bridge, if you will. So I can get the bridge, I can get the surface, but I can't take everything, or I don't have access to everything in the model. Same thing when I go to export to 3ds Max. I can push out a corridor model in my surface, but I don't necessarily have the ability to push out these buildings or this bridge in the level of, well, effectively at all. I would need to do something else with that. All right, so let's take a look at that process. The first thing that I want to do is I'm going to need a surface, or I'm going to need an aerial photograph to drape over the top of my surface when I get into 3ds Max, so that I've got a more realistic looking terrain than just the gray that we've just seen in here. So one way that we can do that from a 3ds Max perspective is I can grab an image off of Google Earth that we can take a look at. So let me minimize these guys. Let's come up to here. I'm going to fire up Google Earth Pro to show you how you can do this. Google Earth Pro now is I believe free. So much like the original viewer, and the advantage to doing this in Pro is it gives us the ability that we can export the surface at a higher, or export the image at a higher level of resolution than what we would get out of the prior version. So let's go to Lake Tahoe. Go find that on our map. Okay, and if we pan over and we start to zoom in, I'll find that location that we were interested in before. All right, I'm going to make sure that I'm not, there we are, make sure that I'm not viewing that at a skewed angle. I'll hit N for north so that it's squared up on the screen, and I'm pretty happy with what I see there. My bridge, my aerial photo is going to fall, or my project is going to fall into this area, but my aerial photo should fit over the top of that fairly well. So what we're going to do, we'll bring this guy up here with the image. We'll say save. I'm going to bump the resolution up, and that's the great thing about on the Pro side is I can get a resolution all the way up to 4,800 pixels. My map options, I'm going to turn off some of the extra information that's going to be added to the map. If I'm going to be using this for something that's going to be displayed as part of an exhibit or whatever, I'll want to make sure that I apply the appropriate attribution with it. For right now, I'm just going to use the aerial. We'll just clean that up so I don't have to worry about that being on my image. We'll go ahead and save that to my desktop here, and we'll just call this aerial. Go ahead and push that out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back to Civil. And what I'd like to do is bring the aerial image into here. If I go to Geolocation, we'll turn the aerial back on so that I get access to the Bing information. And while I can capture an area with Bing, I can't necessarily export that I would be able to use that for other purposes. So I'm giving that a second to pop up on the screen. There we are. We'll capture my area, and we'll just do something in the area of my surface here. We'll turn off the aerial. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to improve the quality of this a bit by highlighting the image and setting it to very fine. Okay. Now, I could bring my image in and use Raster to rubber sheet it and get it much closer to what's here. I'm just going to use a simple align command, A-L-I-G-N, to overlay what I need to with this. To do it, I need 2 points within the map to work with. So I'm going to come up, and this is why I improved the resolution as much as I could. I'm going to draw a circle here at the corner of the first driveway on this street. So that's 1 point that I'm going to use, and then I'm going to come down to the lower corner down here. We'll try this tree in this location. We'll drop a circle in here as well. Maybe at the center of that tree. We're just doing this quick for right now. And we will attach our image. All right, I'll specify my insertion point on the screen and my scale. We'll drop this on the side here, and I'll just scale that up close to the size that I'm looking for. And what I'm going to do is then use the command align, A-L-I-G-N, select my raster image. I'm going to say align it from corresponding point here, the corner of the driveway. I'm going to match that up with the center that we used here. I'm going to back that up, and we'll say the other point we're going to match. And good, we got that tree. So we'll pick the approximate location of the center of that tree. We'll come down into this location here. We'll say to the center of this guy. I'm going to right-click to continue, and I'm going to scale and align based on those points. All right, so it's brought my image in. I can see that over the other one. Let's go ahead and remove the one from Bing now. I've got the new one that I've created. And the trick to using this image and a surface out of Civil 3D with what we export to 3ds Max is I want to make sure that my image and my surface are the same size. All right, now in production, what I would do is I've already got my existing surface. What I would do is probably create a new one, paste the existing surface into it, and then I can take and crop and maybe simplify that surface because it's going into 3ds Max. Maybe I don't need that much detail. That is how I would clean it up for right now, just for time's sake. We will just do it right directly within here. Let's see. I'm going to save this. Let's see if I can use that raster image as a boundary. So we're going to say add data boundary. We'll do limits as an outer boundary. Let's see if we can grab that guy. Nope, filtered it out. Okay, so we're going to have to go around the outside of it. So we'll draw a polyline from around the outside of my raster image. There's that corner down here, and then close. And then what we're going to do is select our surface, add a boundary, limits, select my polyline this time, and my surface is now cropped to that size. All right, perfect. We'll maybe grab that and send it to back just so it's a little easier to see. All right, let's do this. We're going to say output. I'm going to export to 3ds Max. All right, if I export, like I said before, I've got the ability to export some things. Right now, the only thing that's in my model that's supported is the surface. If I'd like to export the centerline alignment, because maybe I'd like to attach cars or something to that, I would need to build a corridor model, because that centerline alignment would actually be exporting the crown of the road, or the feature line that is represented by that corridor. For right now, I'm just going to do the surface. We won't have time to get into cars and things like that. We'll just deal with the surface geometry for right now. So we'll export that out to my folder here. Let's call it civil model is fine. It's been exported. Let's come out to, we'll fire up 3ds Max. Give that a moment to come up on the screen. And what I'm going to do, there was Autodesk was a software acquisition a number of years ago that gave us these civil view tools. And what that does is it creates tools within 3ds Max that are geared more towards somebody that's got a civil background. It helps us manipulate or work with corridor models and alignments and surfaces and that in a way that is more intuitive, I guess, than trying to do it directly through 3ds Max. So when it's in here, we'll find it under Civil View. We'll start Civil View. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to open up the Explorer, and I'm going to double click on that, which is going to dock it on the side, and it's going to give me an environment that's kind of similar or consistent with what we would see in Civil 3D. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to import that file that we exported. So we'll come back to Bonanza here, grab our civil model, and the only geometry that exists in that we'll select is our surface. We'll say OK. Now here's the key. When I bring that geometry into 3ds Max, it's going to want to take and shift it. And it's shifting it away from much larger coordinates so that it's closer to the origin. That helps significantly when it comes to materials and a number of other things in Max. In the Max environment, we're doing rendering and animation, and it just works better with smaller coordinates, so it automatically applies this shift. And that's the key that we'll take a look at here in just a moment. So our surface is in. I can select this surface now, and using my Explorer, we'll come down to draping. I'm going to choose the bitmap off my desktop here from our folder. We'll grab my Bonanza aerial. We'll say yes, and it automatically displays that over my surface. So that looks good. I'm going to change this to a top view. Maybe back up. Find my project here. Now that I'm looking at it in the top view, I'm going to add a daylight to it. We'll do one rendering here, and it'll look better if we have the sun in the sky. So we'll create a daylight system. I'm going to pick a point, draw my north arrow, pull off to the side for my location of the sun. And then if I come over to the side here with my sun selected, say I would like to be able to select that guy. There we go. So with him selected, we're going to grab there we go. So with that guy selected, I can come in and I can set my location. So in this case, it's in Carson City, so we'll pick a point there. It's closest to Reno. We can tell it the time and date, whether or not we're using daylight savings times, and you see as we make adjustments, it adjusts the orientation of the sun so that we get an accurate rendering based on that time of day. So that's working for us. I'm happy with that. What I need to do now is I need to take and bring my bridge in, as well as my section of roadway and my buildings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap this to the side. We're going to go to scene settings so that I can see those values here. I'm then going to go to Navisworks, and I'm going to bring this over to the side. All right, the one piece that we have is this is currently sitting in space where it needs to be. I need to apply this shift so that it falls into 3ds Max where it's supposed to go. I'm going to use the same tool that I did before. When I select this and we do units and transform, instead of now just the feet, I'm going to give it the origin where it's going to go. And I wish I could copy and paste that, but I can't, so we'll just take and type it in. We'll say 180034, and the Y value we're going to use is negative 1606, 605. 605, okay. We'll say okay, it shifts, so it's in a different location. We'll adjust our display and we can see it again. I'm going to go ahead and export this to the same folder, and we'll call it model. I'm just going to say shift, and then I'm going to say max. We'll say save. All right. Now, Dave is very familiar with 3ds Max, so he could probably take this FBX file and he could go with it directly. I'm not a Max person, so I need a little bit of help linking to this file and getting it to come in where it's supposed to and work the way that Max likes. So the great thing is there are other tools within the suite that will help facilitate that for me. So what I'm going to do is we'll maximize 3ds Max. I'm going to leave that here, and then I'm going to fire up AutoCAD. Because within AutoCAD there are tools that support the suite and the ability to move geometry or information from one tool to another. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new drawing in here just off a blank template. By default, units in AutoCAD are inches. What we're working with is feet. So I'm going to type in units. We'll set this to feet. We'll say OK. And then we're going to import that FBX file we made. So we'll come out to our folder. We'll say model shift. Same thing as before. We'll set it to 1 and 1. Brings it in. I'll take and view it in my perspective view, and then if we come in and set this to realistic, all right, I get a very nice representation of my model. All right, now I'm seeing it here as everything within the file. If we don't save it, it doesn't actually exist. So we'll save it so that it retains that information. We'll put that into my project folder here, and we'll just call this model geometry for Max. All right, so I have this, and I'm going to come up to AutoCAD. I'm going to come down, and you'll see that there are suites workflows options that are available to me. 5 specific for the 3ds Max environment. So I'm going to come down to 3ds Max for just rendering a building. This will work fine for what I need. We'll select that. I can send that to Max for final rendering. We'll go ahead and run. Where do I want it to go? I'm going to go to the active 3ds Max session, which is currently set to untitled. That's fine. We'll say continue. It works whatever magic is required. The Max links to this file and it does what it needs to do. It tells me that there's a file link manager within Max that we can make adjustments to it if we need to. For right now, I'm not worried about that. I'm going to go ahead and close. And when I come into the Max environment, we see that all of my geometry is now landed within my file. So that if I come into this guy now and we start to adjust our display, let's go to the perspective here. And I'm going to adjust my display.
Hey, Jerry?
Yes, sir.
If you just select an object and then press Z, it'll zoom to that selected object and orbit around it as well, just so you know.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. All right. For right now, let's just go ahead and run. Get a little bit closer. I'm going to run just a quick render on that guy. So we'll say render production. We'll give that a second. It'll take and render. We should see some of our building in the distance, and then our geometry in that for the roadway. All right, or the bridge that was put in. Okay. Now there are some settings I'm sure that I could put in that it would maybe degrade the settings so that my render would be faster. This will probably take about 30 seconds or so for the frame to complete. But the thing that was important to me, like I said, if we start from the InfraWorks 360 environment, we've got a phenomenal tool that we can create this very detailed, data-rich, three-dimensional models. And effectively, we don't want to leave those just necessarily tied up in the InfraWorks 360 world. We have the ability that we can move and begin to use those in other applications as well. All right, so we saw as we went through, we were able to take that geometry directly into Civil 3D with or without materials. We're able to access it with map if we want to see the outlines of buildings, maybe just to get a perspective of where exactly we are. We moved it through Navisworks to bring it into 3ds Max and then be able to accommodate for the shift to be able to use that as well. And then even leverage some of the AutoCAD tools to be able to use some of the suite's workflows to automate that process. And then finally, I didn't touch it, was the Raster Design piece, but we could have used that for the aerial imagery to assist us in creating a aerial that we could take and drape over our surface. All right, so I guess all in all, a bonanza of information, if you will, from a InfraWorks 360 point and moving this data around. So let me hop back to my slides here. And before we wrap up, because we're getting long on time, I want to make sure that I take a moment just to remind you that, once again, the part 3 of the Creating Animated Objects for InfraWorks 360 is coming up Wednesday, January 20th. I believe Dave will be the primary speaker on that once again. As I mentioned before, his first 2 webcasts were phenomenal, and he is the perfect person to be doing animation. He's a 3ds Max expert with working with materials and all of that as well. All right, so I want to make sure and point that out that folks sign up for that and get in line to attend that. With that, I apologize, we're about 1 minute over, so I'm going to just be respectful of folks' time. We'll close it out for today. I appreciate Dave and Chakri and others who are online addressing questions. If there were other questions that came in, maybe we can hang around and take a look at some of those after the webcast to try and get some of those addressed. So once again, my name is Jerry Bartels, Civil Technical Specialist here with Autodesk. Sincerely appreciate your time and attention today and look forward to seeing you at another upcoming webcast. Have a great day.